Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us on our second webinar on the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, a very exciting new Illinois legislation that is a platform for a lot of good things that are going to be happening in Illinois over the next several years. This one is focused on the Illinois Solar for All aspects of CEJA and is entitled, "What Does Illinois Solar for All Mean?" And I'm very happy to have Dawn Dannenbring Carlson from the Illinois People's Action with us today. But first, as an introduction from myself, I'm Shannon Fulton, Vice President of Development with StraightUp Solar. I've been with StraightUp Solar in various capacities since 2013, and I direct our business development and marketing team. I do our advocacy work on the Illinois side, solar advocacy work on the Illinois side, and am leading an employee ownership initiative and directing our Bloomington office. And Dawn joins us, like I mentioned, as a lead organizer from Illinois People's Action. She's been with IPA since 2008, and she leads the IPA's environmental justice campaigns. She's located in Bloomington, working with grassroots and faith leaders. She was really a pivotal force with the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition on racial justice and equity provisions in the legislation. And Dawn is going to take a deeper dive on the equity provisions separate from the Illinois Solar for All program as part of this webinar today. So about StraightUp Solar, just very briefly, we were founded in 2006. We are bumping up against 100 employees now. We just went through a pretty significant hiring spurt since the law was passed recently, and we have over 40% of our folks that have NABCEP solar certification, North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners. This is the gold standard certification for solar professionals across the country. We have over 1,700 installations to date, ranging from residential up to large industrial system sizes for nonprofits, for-profit businesses, you name it. We're installing solar on it. We're a member of the Amicus Solar Cooperative, and we are a certified benefit corporation. And if you're not familiar with benefit corporations, these are third-party assessed or evaluated companies that, in a nutshell, focus on or balance people and planet with profit. So it's a triple bottom line strategy where while we need to make profit in order to do what we call saving the world in some respects, we also need to make sure that we're doing that in a way that respects people and planet. So today's topics include, I'm going to do just a very brief overview of CEJA, Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, talk a little bit about specifically the Illinois Solar for All program, its performance to date, and improvements to that program through CEJA. And then, like I mentioned, Dawn is going to talk about the equity provisions, new equity provisions in CEJA after I do just these brief introductory points. So, big sigh of relief, right? After 2+ actually challenging years of advocacy, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, Senate Bill 2408, was signed by Governor Pritzker on September 15th. There are several key categories represented in this language. From the solar industry's perspective, one of the very important pieces to this is that it refunded the adjustable block program and puts Illinois on a path initially to 40% renewable energy by 2030. That means a 3.5 time increase in solar and wind development beyond what CEJA had supported. And if you remember, the Future Energy Jobs Act was passed back at the end of 2016. So it sets us up for a lot of renewable energy growth in the state. It phases out coal and natural gas plants. This was a big key point of negotiation that happened toward the end, or at the end of actually getting this bill across the goal line. Very important. Decarbonization was a key part of the legislation. Workforce development and just transition aspects. Anytime you make a pretty significant paradigm change like we're expecting to see, we have to bring the workforce along with it to make sure that these systems get built and folks transitioning out of poverty and out of environments that have been historically taken advantage of, frankly, by the fossil fuel industry. We have to lift populations up to help support the level of renewable energy growth that we need to combat climate change, and also provide opportunity for folks transitioning away from the fossil fuel industry as these plants close. There are ethics and accountability provisions for the public utilities, significant investment in the equity provisions that Dawn is going to talk about, consumer protections, fair rate making. It changes the way it ends unfair formula rates and improves scrutiny by the Illinois Commerce Commission and how investor-owned utilities set rates. It extends very important energy efficiency goals, and really sets up Illinois as a leader from an electric vehicle infrastructure perspective. The things that we're going to focus on tonight are starred here. Renewable energy, the ABP, which the Solar for All program is kind of part of that too. The equitable investments, the equity provisions in the bill, and workforce development programs that Dawn's going to talk about. So, focusing on equity as a priority in the Clean Energy, Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, I want to start with the Illinois Solar for All program, because that program was, I guess we can think of it as a pilot opportunity in the Future Energy Jobs Act. And so that program has been running for 3 years, I think, about 3 years. And there was a significant funding increase in this program that came with CEJA. And one other equity provision in CEJA is the SREC and adjustable block program requires, beginning in delivery year 2023, so I think this is June 2023, 10% of a project's workforce needs to be comprised of equity eligible persons or equity eligible contractors. And this increases to 30% by 2030. And there is, within the adjustable block program now, it went from 3 categories to 6. And one of those additional 3 categories is a 10% carve out for equity eligible contractors. So a specific allocation of the SREC funding goes specifically to new equity eligible contractors. And then there are several other equity based programs that Dawn is going to dive into further. So let's briefly talk about the Illinois Solar for All program. So I mentioned it was a required part of CEJA and with the intent to bring photovoltaics, solar energy, to low-income communities. That was the intent of the creation of this program. And not only that, but to also create, there was also a job training pipeline program that was born from Future Energy Jobs Act that I do believe serves as a very nice foundation for what we're about to see through CEJA on the workforce development front. So the Solar for All program targets projects across low income and environmental justice communities in both urban and rural areas. And originally through FEJA, there was $10 million set aside for low income distributed generation. So these are residential homes, low income community solar, nonprofits and public facilities. And there was a pilot program for low income community solar too. So that was the original structure of the Solar for All program at a high level. The project, StraightUp Solar specifically, was mostly, well, entirely actually involved in the municipal and public nonprofit public facility project development. And we did a lot of work together with CTPP. I don't know if Reverend Pierce was able to join today, but we did some partnered projects at the very beginning of this program and worked together to bring solar power purchase agreements to several churches. And we're, really proud that those were some of the very first programs that were approved, or projects that were approved in the Solar for All program. But here's a list of several of the projects that we were involved in, and mostly centered around churches, critical service providers like community service providers, and there's a Habitat for Humanity there, and Normal Township in the town of Normal were a couple of notable ones. And we're just finishing up the last two projects that for the of this list this year. So when we look at statewide, there were a total of 116 projects across all categories, those different categories in the Illinois Solar for All program. And of those projects, 63 were urban and considered to be located in urban areas, 30 in suburban areas, and 23 in the rural communities. 71 of those were in environmental justice communities, and 94 were located in low-income census tracts. And the solar pipeline job trainees worked on an average of 28% of, the trainees worked an average of 28% of the total project hours for all of these projects. So that's a really important point. The minimum from the beginning, I think, was 10%. So you can see that for the entire program, we almost reached 30% over the year. So I think that's significant. And it should be pointed out that there are a lot of these job training programs that were born from FEJA, located up in the Chicago area. That only one of which is located in Central Illinois, downstate. And that one, Reverend Pierce was also involved in bringing to Peoria at Illinois Central College. And that's the one that StraightUp Solar hired now 5 workers from since the training pipelines began. On average, 44% of trainee hours were spent on installation. So almost half of the folks coming out, or almost half of the hours that trainees were paid for, right? The trainees worked on these projects were spent like boots on the roof type of work. And all of these stats came from the recently released Illinois Solar for All final evaluation report through the IPA. I want this to go away. Okay. So when we think about the environmental attributes of all of these projects being built through the Solar for All program, it replaces the energy being produced by these systems. And again, this was in this evaluation report. Over the next 20 years is estimated to replace over 600,000 tons of coal being burned. I like that statistic. It puts it into something pretty tangible for us to understand. And the estimated value of avoided emissions is greater than $4 million in the first year benefits, and 60 in the first year benefits from all these projects, and 66.5 million in lifetime benefits. So those are, when we talk about the estimated value of avoided emissions, that value is in the avoiding health impacts, environmental impacts. A number of things go into that, the value of the reduced carbon emissions. So I thought that was a unique statistic that I haven't really seen represented all that often, but worth mentioning. And very importantly, estimated value of the increase in economic output in Illinois from these projects was over $34 million in the first year and 40.8 million over the lifetime of these projects. So we're looking at like a 20-year life of these projects from an economic standpoint. And then, you know, there are some additional statistics when it comes to the job years created. And job years is to me, it was a rather new way of expressing employment increase associated with these projects. But suffice to say that there's been significant economic benefits, not only to surrounding communities, but to individuals through this program, which targets individuals living in low-income communities. And like I mentioned, we've been so very lucky to hire five individuals from the training pipeline program. So under CEJA, this specific Illinois Solar for All program is increased at least fivefold. So it goes from 10 to 50 million. And the way I read the language, and Kai is on as well, read the language, that there's additional funding of 20 million per year. What I'm not 100% clear on is whether that 20 million is folded into the 50, but suffice to say that the increase in funding is significant in order to increase development in these communities and find more opportunities to bring solar to individual homeowners as well. One other aspect of CEJA as it applies to Illinois Solar for All is that 35% of the funding must go to low-income single-family and small multifamily solar. So that's one category. 35% of it goes to that category. 40% of the funding for community solar, and 25% for the nonprofit and public facilities or on-site photovoltaics. It removed the community solar. The new CEJA rules removed the category of the community solar pilot program. All categories must allocate at least 25% of funding to serving EJ communities, environmental justice communities. And as an example, an environmental justice community is, you know, think about the community where these fossil fuel plants have been historically located and have borne the brunt of the emissions and contamination, the health impacts of living in those environments with poor air, soil, and water quality. So up to 5% of the Illinois Solar for All funds will go to grassroots education or nonprofit organizations that work to provide education about the program to the communities, several different communities in Illinois. And one other aspect is that the IPA, the Illinois Power Agency, must report on any barriers to participation in this program of small and emerging businesses. And to round out my section of the webinar tonight, I just wanted to show just a few photographs or aerial photos of some of our projects. This is one from the Normal Township in the town of Normal. It's a senior nonprofit organization tending to seniors and providing activities and life skills opportunities for seniors, located in the town of Normal. And this is the Wayman AME Church in Bloomington, near and dear to Kai Ajayi's heart. This is his church that he developed this particular project. And here is another photo of one of the other roof faces that has solar as well. Okay, now, Dawn, I'd like to invite you to share. I will stop sharing and invite you to share your slide. And if you would also like to talk a little bit more about Illinois People's Action at the beginning of your presentation, please do that.
Very good. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. And Illinois People's Action, as Shannon said, we are a grassroots faith and community-based organization. We have leaders as far north as Rockford and as far south as Ozark, Illinois, in many of the communities and rural areas in between. Our home office is in Bloomington, which is where I'm talking to you from tonight. Shannon, I really appreciate you saying all the work that I have done, but really it is IPA leaders, and many of them are on the phone, and Reverend Tony Pierce is with us tonight. And the precursor to the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act was this FEJA, Future Energy Jobs Act. And IPA really pushed for equity in that bill and had meetings in Peoria in the church basement of Reverend Alfonso Lyons and hearing from leaders on the ground about what they wanted to see in that bill. So, but we knew even as we were passing that bill that it was not going to do enough either for the climate crisis or for equity. And so members of the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, of which IPA is part of, we held a couple hundred listening sessions around the state and asked people on the ground, what do you want to see in a climate bill with equity, jobs, and justice? And it turns out they wanted a lot. So I'm going to spend a fair amount of the time talking about the hubs, the system of hubs. You'll see on the slide, it talks about workforce hubs, returning residents, prime contractor program, and the contractor incubator. So you're going to hear a lot about those. And then at the end, at a much more high level, I will talk about some of the other equity provisions. Let's see if I can advance this. Okay, down here. Okay, so these workforce hubs, there were 3 that came in CEJA, and there are 13 that come with CEJA. And 3 are in Chicagoland, with the other 10 outside of Chicago. They are targeted at environmental justice communities, which Shannon just defined, and Black, Indigenous, and people of color individuals and communities. And then within the targeted areas, and I'm going to show you a map yet in just a second, preference will be given to those who face barriers to employment, like low educational attainment, prior involvement in the legal system, language barriers, and either current or previous involvement in the child welfare system. You can see the 13 equity hubs. The location has already been identified, and those are right on the slide there. So Bloomington Normal folks, we are not getting one here, but we'll talk about some options for that. So you should be able to see hopefully 3 maps on your screen. And this might sound kind of confusing, but I'm going to try to walk you through it. So this is how people get into the Hubs program. So the map on your left is what is called an R3 map. And this was set up actually in the cannabis bill. We can't use direct language with regard to race in this bill for fear of being sued, which is what happened out in Washington state, but we can track this information. And if it looks like there is racial inequity, then we can introduce that language in a future draft. But R3 areas on the left and environmental justice communities in the middle, if you superimposed those 2 maps over each other, that will be where 1/3 of the folks that come into this hub system, they will come from those communities. That will be given priority. And then another 1/3 on top of that would come from either an R3 area or an EJ area. So, you know, you can see a little tiny blue dot halfway between Peoria and Champaign. Bloomington Normal, that is where I am now. I believe that is the west side of Bloomington. You can see a large portion on the south side of Peoria. There are other portions on this map. And then the far right map on the screen, that is the Illinois Solar for All area. And I included that. Shannon, thank you for sending that. And I just thought it might be good to see a comparison between the 3. So let's talk about what happens in these equity workforce hubs. So there are job preparedness and soft skills. It's kind of on the screen, and wraparound services aimed at breaking down barriers, you know, from people that might not be able to normally participate in a job. And those kinds of things that break down the barriers are stipends for training time, stipends for transportation, for childcare, for supplies, for work clothes, you name it, books, you name it, they have kind of thought of it all. The tools you need on the job, there are stipends for all of those types of things. There is training leading to professional credentials, NABCEP training for those of you who have been through, various things that credential you, that make you more desirable for an organization or a company that is doing this work to want to employ you. And then there are job placement and transition services, things to get you in that pipeline, linking you with potential employers, and then once you're in the job, making sure that you are successful in that job. Okay, moving on. Then there is a returning residents program, and this is very much like the Hubs program I just talked about, and it targets soon to be returning residents who are 17 years or older that are currently in the Department of Corrections, but who will be returning into society within the next year. And many of the offerings mirror what is in the workforce hubs that I just talked about. They also get both solar and energy efficiency. There are a couple of tracks in this program, and their wraparound services also include mental health and case management services, as well as the other wraparounds that the workforce hubs offer. And then there's a program administrator that is tasked with developing a selection process to include both correctional facilities for men and women. And this is funded at about $6 million or up to $6 million annually. And if you'll notice on the slides, I have page numbers on all of this. And at the end, I'll try to put a link in. These are the page numbers where you can actually find this information in the bill itself. Now, this is a 956 page bill. There is no way I'm going to get through all the equity provisions, because equity is written throughout this bill. But if you see a page number, that's where this section starts. So I should have said that sooner. I apologize for that. Then there will be 3 hubs that are run by labor. And these hubs are going to focus on careers in the clean energy sector, construction and building sectors. And those are funded up to $10 million annually. And I know a little bit less about what they will be doing because labor will be determining that, but they will also be working with these regional program administrators on what the curricula for their hubs will be. The next set of hubs are the contractor incubator hubs, and they are complementary to the 13 workforce hubs. There will be 13 entrepreneurship or contractor incubator hubs, and they provide training and mentorship and recruitment opportunities for small clean energy businesses and contractors. These are folks that kind of are newly starting out in the clean energy sector. And let's take a look. They also get access to low cost capital, but let's take a look at some of the things that these hubs will provide. So the purpose of these hubs is to build the skills of new and developing green energy contractors and assist them with everything they need to be successful in training and mentoring, to networking, to access of this low cost capital. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the money in a minute. And funding for these hubs comes from the Energy Transition Assistance Fund, which again, I will talk about in a few minutes. And then CEJA requires all of the hubs to keep track of a variety of metrics to make sure that they are serving people in the way that we intended, in the way that is written in the bill, to demonstrate that they are meeting demographic data on the participants and who's getting hired and where they're getting hired and the kind of contracts they're getting and how this is impacting their bottom lines. So all of these things that you see on the screen are the types of services that they will be getting in these hubs. Okay, now let's say that you are already a Black, Indigenous, person of color contractor, and you have been in the clean energy business for at least 2 years, and you prioritize equity. Well, then this is a program you might be interested in. It is the BIPOC Prime Contractor Accelerator, funded to a tune of $9 million a year. And it creates a structured program for contractors seeking to expand their capacity and to fill a role as a prime contractor on clean energy projects. And prime contractors typically hire other contractors, and we don't have many BIPOC prime contractors in Illinois. And so this is important because as Reverend Pierce has often told me, that people tend to hire other people who look like them. And if we are really serious about impacting racial equity, we need to make sure not just that people are getting good paying jobs, but they actually have opportunities to start and succeed in this clean energy revolution by having their own businesses. So there is scoring criteria to get in, and if people want to know more about that, I'll cover that in the Q&A. I just want to make sure I have time to get through all the slides before then. It's a 5-year program with new cohorts coming in every 18 months. And it is a competitive program admission process based on past performance. And once again, we can talk more about that later. But it's a fairly small group, and they get a lot of hands-on, one-on-one instruction and business planning so that they can be successful in the long term. Well, I guess I was jumping the gun here because I have some of the things that they get. They also get operational support grants and interest-free and low interest loans. It is expensive to start up a business. And as you're going to see in a moment, a lot of the big jobs require paying a prevailing wage. And the smaller your company is, the harder it is to pay a prevailing wage. So those are some types of things, some startup costs for which there will be money available. Technical assistance with MBE, that's minority business enterprises, and other certifications, and also with the CEJA bidding opportunities. You heard Shannon talking about Illinois Solar for All, or the RFP process, which is getting in on some of the bigger solar projects that will be happening around the state. So we want them to be able to bid and to compete successfully in that realm as well. To make sure that eligible people hear about these programs, we need folks that that can identify who would be people that might be interested in this, both individuals coming into the workforce hubs and contractors for the contractor programs or the accelerator programs. And the energy navigators, it's not a person per se, they're actually community organizations who will get these energy navigator, it's paid, and they are organizations who already have a history of serving low wage or low skilled workers or individuals from economically disadvantaged communities. And when I say that, I'm really talking about 80% of median income. And the purpose of these navigators is to engage individuals to participate in the workforce hubs, in the pre-apprenticeship program for labor, in the returning residents clean jobs program, in the incubator and the contractor program. And the navigators will provide education and outreach and recruitment. And if you read it in the bill, it kind of sounds like they'll use any means necessary to make sure that the programs are fully filled with people who can benefit from it and then take those skills forward and be successful in careers in the field. Okay, so how do we fund all this stuff? As I just said, it's not cheap. So there's kind of 3 programs in particular that I just want to introduce you to. There is this Jobs and Environmental Justice Grant Program. That is the seed capital, funded to a tune of up to $34 million annually. And that provides participants both in the Contractor Incubator Program as well as the Prime Contractor Development Program. 75% of the funds go to equity eligible contractors as seed capital and pre-development funding. And then 25% can go to support communities that are pursuing energy sovereignty via community-owned solar. And then next on that list, the Clean Energy Jobs and Justice Fund. That's an inclusive financing nonprofit to support disadvantaged contractors and customers. So there's low-cost loans and business development, and that will be available to eligible contractors with the goal of bringing the benefits of the clean energy economy to diverse communities. And then the last, this Illinois Finance Authority Climate Bank, it actually establishes the Illinois Finance Authority as a climate bank and allows the authority to aid clean energy and climate resilience efforts. We know that the climate crisis is already here, and environmental justice communities typically experience the climate crisis first and worst, and we need to be having resilience in those communities, and the funding will be available through this, although there has been no specific funding allocated yet. So that is something we need to continue organizing on and paying attention to, because we want to make sure that that funding is there as it's going to be needed. And then finally, one that I don't have on the screen is an Equitable Energy Upgrade Program that offers on-bill financing with robust consumer protections. And this program, which is primarily for energy efficiency, can also be used for rooftop solar and has guaranteed savings. So when I'm talking about guaranteed savings, that means that whatever you pay on your bill is less than the amount of energy saved. So, and 20 million has been set aside to support that program through the utilities. So, okay, let's move on here. We want to make sure that people, that these are good jobs. So there is a Prevailing Wage Act, and prevailing wages must be paid on all projects except the smaller residential and housing houses of worship up to 100 kilowatts. And those smaller projects often have a difficult time penciling out on prevailing wage. There is money that will be available to make sure that prevailing wages are paid on all of the larger projects. The equity eligible contractors also will receive administrative support from state agencies to comply with the prevailing wage requirements. And labor unions that are benefiting must also develop a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan and provide transparent public reporting so that, you know, we can make sure all of this is being complied with and that it's reaching the equity populations that we want to make sure are served. So let me provide a very brief summary of all the workforce and contract development. Over 80 million a year going to workforce and contract development programs that are targeted in equity-focused communities. And we're super excited to see this happen. This is a lot of money. What we saw in CEJA was good. What we're going to see in CEJA is great. So, all right, let me, when I started, I noted that this is a 956-page bill and that equity is written throughout. We just kind of did a deep dive into the hubs, but I promised you a snapshot of some other areas of equity. Shannon already covered some of these, so I will do some of these quickly. That Illinois Solar for All moving from 10 million to 50 million. The adjustable block program, which is going to put solar on schools and community-driven solar and renewable energy projects led by Black, Indigenous, and people of color contractors. And then Shannon also talked about this equity accountable system that starts with 10% set aside by equity eligible contractors and increasing to 30% by 2030. There's also equity in the bill with regard to decarbonization. So we want to get off the dirty energy you see in the upper left-hand corner of the screen and bring in renewable energy, solar. CEJA mandates that we close the dirty coal and gas plants in environmental justice communities first. And that is where the plants are. I mean, that's how a lot of these communities became environmental justice communities, because really, let's be honest, when is the last time you saw a dirty coal-fired plant in a rich gated community? Not going to happen. So they get shut down first. They get prioritized for shutdown, and it shuts down private 25+ megawatt coal and oil fired plants by 2030. And then with regard to decarbonization, there are various steps, particularly with regard to coal, where they have to show ratcheting down. Sadly enough, some new gas got its foot in the door in the 11th hour in CEJA. For all of you IPA folks, you know that we fought for years against fracking. We're not thrilled about natural gas still being allowed to get its foot in the door. And in fact, we just learned recently that there is a new company down in Pawnee, Illinois, that has applied to build a new gas plant down there. So if that's something you're interested in, I just sent an email out to IPA leaders. I think we're going to be going down to provide testimony to the EPA about why they should not allow gas build out in the state of Illinois. So let's look for a minute at just transition. before we wrap up here, what happens when fossil fuel plants shut down? Well, CEJA has energy transition community grants that are available for communities with closing or recently closed power plants or coal mines to address the economic hardship and impacts in that transition from dirty fossil fuels to clean energy. And that's funded up to $40 million a year. There are also a number of other just transition opportunities in the grant, in the bill. There's an energy transition barrier reduction program that provides resources for equity investment in equity investment eligible communities. And this is funding for publicity, for placement, and for retention to break down the barriers for moving those folks into clean energy jobs. And then there's a Displaced Energy Workers Bill of Rights, and that provides workers with advance notice of power plant or coal mining closure, because lots of times these workers have not known, and then the plants close down quickly and they are left high and dry. So it provides them with opportunities and career services and financial planning services. And then there is a Displaced Energy Worker Dependent Transition Scholarship that offers one-year full-time scholarships to a state-supported college or university for the children of displaced energy workers. And finally, the Energy Transition Workforce Commission is their studies and reports on workforce impacts will be available on anticipated plant and mine closures, on related revenue, environmental and economic impacts. Those are all required for in CEJA. All right, this is my final slide. I want to wrap up by saying that just because you get a great bill doesn't mean that things will necessarily happen like magic. We actually have to win the win. We have to make sure that this bill is implemented in the way that we worked hard to get it written and to get it passed. So we want to engage as many of you in this fight as possible, because we know it probably will still be a fight. I was just talking about the fight with the gas. So we want to see us having a true transition to a clean energy economy with equity smack in the middle of it. And you're gonna see just a less than a 2-minute video now. This is Rakai's story. She actually was trained under the Future Energy Jobs Act up at that Peoria hub. Reverend Pierce, if you're still on, maybe when we get to the question and answer period, you can talk a little bit more about that. And you're going to see StraightUp Solar in this as well.
My life before solar was really, really hard. I worked at different restaurants. I pretty much had every single job you could think of. And in every job that I've had, I've been discriminated against. No type of career is offered for people like me. When I first started with Jobs Partnership, I was like, I don't know if this is really gonna work. I actually started at a 3rd grade reading and math level, but I still put my all into it every single day. When I finished, I had the highest grades out of the entire class. I feel like this was a dream come true, because not only am I helping out the environment, but I'm also giving people in my community something to look up to. People look at me and say, "Are you a solar installer?" I'm like, yes, I am, and I definitely love it. If you told me 5 years ago that I'd be a solar installer, I'd probably laugh at you because I was scared of heights. But when I stepped on the roof, that's when I knew that this is something I want to do for the rest of my life.
Okay, Shannon, you want to come back?
Yeah, I love that video. And we love Rakai. She's, she's now doing what we call a role of solar support specialist. So when we have solar for all projects that are built, she's building, helping to build those, but she's also getting cross-training and opportunity in an office position as well. And she's doing wonderfully. We feel so fortunate that she decided to join our team. Well, thank you everybody for joining tonight. The conversations will continue. This is just the very beginning. And again, big thanks to Illinois People's Action, Dawn, and all of the other organizations and folks that made these provisions possible and fought so hard for them. We all appreciate that.
200 of them, 200 organizations across the state. So
yes,
thank you so much for having us, Shannon.
All right, you're welcome. I'm just checking the messages one more time. Okay, very well. Well, good night, everybody. Thanks again.